Hi, my name is Serhat Begic. I'm a student of International Sports Management in The Hague, and today I'm going to talk about the impact of the media on gender inequality within sport. The media is one of the most influential forms of socialization in today's society in generating gender values. Indeed, the mass media plays a significant role in the transmission of gender differences and inequality through daily visuals within print and television media. Individuals are inundated with magazines and newspapers containing photographs and narratives of what it means to be a woman or a man, and more specifically, the gender imbalance between men and women. These gender role differences are especially apparent in the world of sport. While women have gained ground in the non-sporting realm within the confines of court or field, they are still viewed as the women first and athletes second, while their male counterparts have no such concerns. Early leading researchers such as Messer and Rowan Brown have elaborated on the idea that the sport realm remains a site where gender inequality is accepted as the norm. Patriarchal values, which have historically been associated with sport, are continually reinforced by the media. For example, Western culture is the embodiment of masculinity, and that the feminine ideal body contrasts with the idea of what it means to be a female athlete. In particular, sports women live in two distinctly separate cultures, the sporting culture and their larger culture where they must deal with the continual clash between being an athlete and a woman. This is an important concept within the sport and media context because sport has traditionally been regarded primarily as a male territory and one where the socio-cultural values are reflected and at times created. The media's analysis of sporting events and athletes serves to reaffirm gender differences and the gender order. This video will show that despite claims that female athletes are now considered equal to their male counterparts, there is still a fascination on the female body of an athlete rather than on her athletic skills. Importance of masculinity. From an early age, men and women are socialized differently. Men are taught to play sports or watch sports by many different agents such as family, peers, and schools, while predominantly women are taught that sporting activities are only for men. These agents emphasized that sport was for males and created a situation where sport and masculinity become synonymous. During this period, the media further produces, reproduces, and sustains such masculinity with concepts such as the underrepresentation, trivialization, and sexualization of women athletes. Not only are women athletes underrepresented, trivialized, and sexualized, but the media plays a role in emphasizing the femininity of athletes. Sport media not only avoids covering women athletes, but when it does cover them, those athletes conform to the Eurocentric ideals of what a woman must be as both an athlete and a woman. Western patriarchal society has historically devalued the concept of women athletes by proclaiming women as inferior to men, and it has only been within the last 30 to 40 years that women have challenged this myth and made the idea of women athletes in sports a possible reality. Women have been viewed as unequal to male in all components of society, and discrimination has always been apparent in sports, from the exclusion of blacks in baseball to female athletes in amateur and professional sports. The recent rise in women's sports coverage is happening at the level where those who conform to the traditional values of being a woman are receiving greater benefits as those who do not conform to societal norms. Women who violate traditional gender roles are not covered as much by the media as those who conform. Within each of these themes is an array of ways in which the sport media continues to reinforce and reproduce hegemonic masculinity within sport. Underrepresented and trivialized. One of the first issues concerning the perception of inequality with sport is the media's underrepresentation and trivializing of women athletes. This theme is apparent not only in the underreporting of women athletes but also of their events, the lack of coverage or acknowledgement of women's sports and athletes being covered. The fact that women's sports and athletes are continually ignored by the sports media means the media presents the image that it does not value them compared to men's sports and men athletes. In fact, men represent the norm and women represent the other. The other is the concept where women are a woman first and an athlete second, and is a leading component in the trivialization of them as athletes. The media continually diminishes the accomplishments of women's sports and athletes in such a way that the general public is unaware of the number of women athletes and their accomplishments. For example, the sports women represent a small number of all covers even if these women engage in socially acceptable sports. Sports that were generally specific for men were contact sports, such as football or rugby, and these types of sports consisted of masculine characteristics such as danger, risk, strength, endurance, and violence, while for women it was sports which emphasized grace and aesthetic appeal that were considered acceptable for media coverage. Another particularly interesting aspect of how the media covers women's sports is in the context of the team versus individual sport. For example, during most of the Olympic Games, television emphasized individual sports such as swimming and diving and paid no attention to physical contact sports. In fact, nearly twice as much airtime went to women's non-contact individual sports compared to team sports. There are also other examples, such as when women play gender-appropriate sport, it has the highest media coverage. Additionally, female athletes were continually called by their first names or as girl or young lady, and these inferences suggest an infantilization of the women athlete. This practice of calling men by their last names or young men shows a hierarchy of naming, where men are given the dominant role and women are familiarized. The language used diminishes women athletes and denies them adulthood and therefore again reaffirms masculinity within sport. This type of commentary is still used to denigrate women's sports and particularly in tennis. Tennis is given a media coverage because it remains true to the classification of what is socially acceptable. It is a non-contact sport where the athletes maintain strict standards of femininity. Yet both print and television media trivialize the women athletes by suggesting they are not real athletes. For example, on Wimbledon tennis championships, journalists trivialize women athletes both within their photographic poses and the text that accompany with them. In particular, the numerous babes and girls comments mentioned about women athletes propose the idea that men are the dominant gender. The language from the commentators reinforce traditional gender stereotypes where the athletic achievements of women are devalued. It is important to note that language plays a significant role within how the consumers interpret gender and in reinforcing the consumer's perception of what is feminine and masculine. Women athletes who are less glamorous get less attention from the media than those who are. The highlighting of the femininity of athlete focuses on the non-athletic achievement and therefore serves as a trivialization factor in their athletic accomplishments. Sexualized and encourage heterosexualization. When the media emphasizes women as attractive and feminine, this shifts attention from their skills to their looks and minimizes the threat these women pose to the male dominance of sport. Social definitions of gender have characterized the sexual polarization and inequality. The polarization of the sexes has been a dynamic component in the inferior status given to women athletes. Though women have always been physically active throughout the centuries, they have constantly been restricted by society. Examples of this have been the classification of athletes as potentially dangerous to women's creative ability. Today, modern sports have evolved to foster the socialization of males in line with previous eras of what constitutes masculine identity and attitude. A sport that is considered masculine functions in society to reinforce the sense of separation between men and women, and such ideas lead to the construction of the ideologies concerning the female body and the polarization of the sexes. Ideologies such as women having softer and weaker bodies than men increase the belief that women's bodies are not suitable for sports which require physical contact, and women who do participate in these sports are not real women. The idea of women having a biologically inferior body has been extensively used to justify the exclusion of females in certain sports and influence the idea that women who choose masculine sports are promoting lesbianism and other unfeminine traits. The female body continues to be identified as an object within sport, and women often experience significant conflict with the negotiation of being an athlete and being a woman. The media plays a prominent role in the sexualization of women athletes. Being a successful athlete contradicted a woman's prescribed societal gender role, and therefore women were required to overcompensate for their masculinity as an athlete. Women athletes often find themselves in the double bind of maintaining traditional standards of femininity while their sport demands they overcome them or overemphasize them. The first context of sexualization is the concept of appearance. Studies observe that print media focus on the physical appearance of women athletes much more than their athletic skills and abilities. Many studies referenced hair, makeup, and body shape for the women, but rarely, if ever, focus on the same things for the men. Heterosexism is an important part of the hierarchical gender order, and women can excel athletically providing they are heterosexually attractive. For example, female tennis player Kornikova, despite she never winning a major tennis tournament, she is still worth more money than any other tennis player, past or present, because of her scantily clad figure. Women's entrance into sports was unsettling, unwelcome intrusion into the realm of masculinity. Women who played sports were viewed as manly or lesbians. The beauty and grace of the athletes was fundamental to the athlete's overall experience, and therefore to be a women athlete in our society is to act in a manner considered contrary to traditional gender roles. When women athletes were successful and athletic, they were labeled as lesbians. Labeling powerful women as lesbians is an attempt to ostracize and disempower them. The print media marginalize athletes through the photographs and commentary within the text. When women are actually showing active poses in newspapers, magazines, or the internet, usually the text would portray them as passive and decorative objects. The rules of femininity are transmitted through the visual images we see on a daily basis, and we learn through the images what is appropriate and not appropriate. One must remember that journalists are not objective. They are there to sell newspapers, and therefore the photographs and text are laced with subjectivity even when they are put forward as being equal. Examining the relationship between gender and the sport media has created a substantial body of research in the sports sociology field. Much of this information has relied on content analysis dealing with the stereotyped images of sport women, language and textual commentary that has provided a devaluation in apparent across all sports. Sport is not merely some objective institution, but rather it has the potential influence the norms, values, and beliefs of the largest social practices. The media and sports symbiotic relationship constructs and utilizes gender stereotypes to maintain gender inequality and gender differences, both actively through written words and passively through photographs. Sport sells mass media and media sells sport. Therefore, the media has biased coverage because it assumes its consumers are men and aligns its coverage to suit its potential customers. Pedersen eloquently stated the symbiotic relation fosters the acceptance of masculinity as a defining character of Western society, and the media create and reflect its hegemonic masculinity. Without doubt, sport is still viewed as man's world, and change will slow but can occur. That would be all. Thanks for watching.